A Miracle at the Keys, the heart-stopping story of Arya Bellamy. Hey there, beautiful souls. Welcome to a story that'll tug at your heartstrings, lift your spirit, and remind you that sometimes the quietest voices make the loudest impact. Picture this: a grand concert hall, glittering with chandeliers, buzzing with anticipation. And then, a single harsh sentence slices through the air like a lightning bolt. Get her off my stage. She's blind. She'll damage the Steinway. Those words, spat by a world-famous pianist, could have crushed a dream. Instead, they sparked a miracle. This is the story of Arya Bellamy, a blind girl who didn't just play music. She changed the way the world listens. So grab a cozy spot, maybe a tissue or two, and let's dive into this unforgettable tale of courage, heart, and harmony. Oh, and before we start, hit that subscribe button. We share moving stories like this every day. Drop a comment to tell us where you're watching from. Ready? Let's go. The Vienna Grand Harmony Hall was alive with whispers, the kind that hum before a big performance. Velvet seats filled with elite guests, diplomats, critics, music royalty, chattered softly under the glow of a massive crystal chandelier. At the center of it all stood a grand Steinway piano, its polished black surface gleaming like a promise. And there, just inches from it, was Arya Bellamy. She was young, maybe 14 or 15, her slender frame draped in a simple dress, a white cane resting lightly in one hand. Her other hand hovered above the keys, not touching, just feeling. Her cloudy eyes, unseeing, stared somewhere beyond the piano, her face calm, almost serene. Then came the voice, sharp and cold, cutting through the room like a blade. Keep her away from the Steinway. This isn't a charity recital. It was Victor Bell, a legend in classical music. His silver hair gleamed, his icy blue eyes commanded the room. His hands, insured for millions, pointed dismissively at Arya. She's blind, for heaven's sake. She'll damage it. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few heads turned, some whispered, others froze. The stage manager stammered, "Sir, she just asked to touch the keys. She's not even scheduled to." "I don't care," Victor snapped, his voice a whip. "You don't let a child play in traffic just because she wants to drive. Get her off my stage." Arya didn't flinch. She didn't cry or shrink away. Her chin lifted slightly, delicate but steady, like a flower refusing to bend in a storm. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice soft as a breeze, floating across the stage. "I didn't mean to interrupt." Victor turned his back, already dismissing her. "The world has enough sob stories," he muttered. But someone was watching. An off-duty security guard, his phone half-tucked in his pocket, had pressed record, not even sure why. Something about Arya's stillness, her quiet strength, made his thumb move. She stepped back, her cane tapping softly, and walked away. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Not respect, but the sticky quiet that follows cruelty. Nobody knew her name. Not yet. 2 years earlier, Arya Bellamy was just another shadow in the marble corridors of Eastbrook Conservatory, a place where names like Beethoven and Bach were whispered with reverence, but surnames like Bellamy meant nothing. Eastbrook was a fortress of privilege, where students were the sons and daughters of ambassadors, conductors, and retired ballet legends. Arya arrived with none of that. Just a caseworker, a threadbare suitcase, a broken braille reader, and a metronome without a battery. She wasn't even admitted as a student. She was a silent observer, a polite way of saying she could linger in the hallways but never touch a stage or classroom. But oh, did she soak it all in? Arya would sit cross-legged outside practice rooms, her fingers tracing invisible chords in the air. She'd feel the vibrations of pianos through the floorboards, her hands twitching with every note. She'd linger outside Professor Alcott's lecture hall, her body swaying to the rhythm of his lessons, even though she couldn't see the scores he described. It was Alcott who first noticed her. One rainy evening, when the conservatory's arched glass roof thrummed with downpour, he found her in the hallway, hands suspended midair, eyes closed, following a silent melody. "Are you mimicking my lecture?" he asked, half amused, half curious. "I was trying," she whispered. "I'm sorry." "For what?" he pressed. She hesitated, her voice barely audible. "For being here." Alcott blinked. The hallway smelled of old stone and polished wood, thunder growling outside. "Don't be sorry," he said firmly. "Be precise." From that day, Alcott became her guide. When the other students left and the lights dimmed, he stayed behind. He didn't teach her with sheet music. She couldn't read it. Instead, he painted music with words. A fugue was chasing your own shadow. Debussy was water tumbling downhill, free and wild. He tapped rhythms on her knuckles, hummed scales into her ear until she could feel pitch without hearing it. Arya absorbed it all with a speed that was almost frightening. Her hands, long and elegant, seemed made for the keys, as if they'd been waiting her whole life to sing. But talent wasn't enough at Eastbrook. When the conservatory announced its Young Virtuoso Showcase, Alcott submitted an application for her, listing only her name, her skill, and a recommendation so glowing it felt like a prayer. She was allowed to audition barely. Her slot was at 7:45 a.m., before most faculty arrived, on an out-of-tune baby grand in a dusty rehearsal wing. No audience, no welcome, just one judge who barely looked at her. Arya sat in silence, her fingers trembling for a moment, then played. Rachmaninoff's prelude in G minor poured from her like a living thing, massive, tender, aching. When she finished, the judge nodded curtly and left without a word. She never got a call back. What Arya didn't know was that someone had been listening. A janitor, pausing outside the rehearsal room to empty his mop bucket, had heard her play. Unlike the judge, he was moved. That night, he uploaded a grainy video he'd taken on his phone, titling it, "Blind Girl Rejected by Conservatory Plays Rachmaninoff by Heart." It didn't go viral right away, but a piano blogger in Berlin shared it. Then a music therapist in Argentina. Then a retired cellist in Brooklyn. Within days, the video exploded, shared across continents. "She plays like she's telling her own story," one commenter wrote. "I felt that in my chest," said another. The conservatory's board panicked. Behind closed doors, administrators scrambled. "Can we track her IP address?" one asked, forgetting Arya didn't even own a phone. She was unreachable until she wasn't. An envelope arrived at Eastbrook, hand-delivered, its edges gilded. It was from the International Gala of Human Harmony, a global concert broadcast to over 60 countries, themed Breaking Barriers in Sound. They wanted Arya Bellamy to open the show. The dean nearly choked on his espresso. This wasn't a request, it was a declaration. Arya was no longer a shadow in the hallway. She'd share the stage with Victor Bell himself. Victor wasn't pleased. "She'll ruin the program's integrity," he told the gala's director, Gerard Morrow, during a pre-rehearsal walkthrough in Vienna. His voice was calm, too calm, like a winter wind before it bites. "She's a child, blind, untrained. It's political and you know it." Gerard raised an eyebrow, his French accent sharp with steel. "And yet, the world is waiting to hear her. Haven't you seen the numbers?" Victor exhaled, sharp and slow. "This isn't a talent show." "No," Gerard replied, smiling faintly. "It's a reckoning." Across the city, Arya stood barefoot in her hotel suite, the cool marble floor beneath her toes veined like frozen rivers. She tilted her head, listening to the wind against the window, the distant growl of traffic, the faint tap of a tree branch on glass. She mapped the world through sound, always had. Professor Alcott, who'd flown with her despite being replaced by a flashy manager, whispered during the flight, "In all my years, I never imagined I'd be traveling the world with the finest pianist I ever taught, and one the school never admitted." Arya smiled softly. "They admitted my footsteps. That's something." He chuckled. "You always did play with quiet defiance." The rehearsal was the next afternoon. Arya hadn't touched a piano since that humiliating day with Victor. Not out of fear, but because something inside her had shifted. Playing used to be her escape, her way of folding the world's pain into melody. Now the world wanted to listen, not as background noise but as truth. The weight of that was immense. When the rehearsal hall doors opened, a spotlight swept down like a blade of light. Arya stepped forward, Alcott at her side, her fingers brushing the edge of the piano bench. It was a Steinway D concert grand, the kind she'd dreamed of. Its finish was cold, smooth, untouched. Her fingers trembled for a moment, then stilled. She sat, and every sound in the hall retreated. The dust seemed to pause. She placed her hands on the keys but didn't play. She held the silence, stretching it, commanding it, until it bent to her will. Then, with a breath so soft it barely existed, she began. The notes weren't from any known sonata or concerto. They were hers, raw, unscored, born in that moment. A single G, soft and uncertain, like a child reaching into the dark. Then a ripple of triplets, followed by a broken chord that felt like sunlight through grief. Her left hand moved deliberately, more felt than heard. Technicians, ushers, even a man fixing a rigging cable froze. No one spoke. No one dared. Victor, standing in the wings, stopped mid-sentence. His eyes narrowed. She's not reading from anything, he thought. Not even muscle memory. This is pure invention. It was haunting, unsettling. No one plays like this without being broken first, he mused. Then it hit him, she wasn't broken. He was. The melody shifted, minor chords rising in wounded defiance. Arya leaned forward, her face serene, open like a door left ajar in a storm. Then, without warning, she stopped mid-chord. Her hands hovered. No resolution, no applause, just silence. A silence that thundered through the hall like the aftermath of a war. The rehearsal director, stunned, stepped forward. "Miss Bellamy, will that be your piece for the gala?" She tilted her head, considering. "No," she said softly. "That was just a warm-up." Victor's jaw clenched. The next day, his agent requested to change the performance order. Victor no longer wanted to follow Arya. He wanted to open. The request was denied. The Grand Harmony Hall buzzed with silk and diamonds on gala night. Diplomats, royalty, critics, and composers filled every velvet seat. Cameras locked in, the orchestra tuned beneath golden archways. Backstage, Victor warmed up alone, his fingers dancing with practiced precision. Every note perfect, every tempo exact. In a nearby room, Arya sat quietly, hands in her lap, listening to the vibrations of the audience shuffling in. She didn't need sight to feel the weight of thousands. Alcott stood beside her, holding her cane. "Are you afraid?" he whispered. "No," she said, her voice steady. "I've already played my hardest song. This one's just truth." He smiled. "Then give it to them." The announcer's voice boomed. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage, Arya Bellamy." A ripple of curiosity ran through the crowd. Some leaned forward. Others flipped through programs, searching for her name. Most had never heard of her, but those who'd seen the viral video sat motionless, anticipation bubbling like a held breath. The house lights dimmed. A golden beam spilled onto the stage, illuminating the Steinway like a monolith of sound. Arya appeared, not with fanfare, but quietly, barefoot in a simple black gown, one hand on Alcott's arm, the other holding her cane. The audience watched in reverent silence as she approached the piano, her steps slow but sure. Alcott guided her to the bench, then stepped back into the shadows. Arya sat, hands in her lap, head bowed. Not in submission, but in communion, like a poet before a blank page. The silence grew sacred. Then, barely audible, she inhaled. Her fingers rose, hovered, and began to play. What came wasn't Beethoven or Bach. It wasn't even a recognizable prelude. It was a story. The right hand fluttered in delicate ripples, like raindrops on glass. Playful, hesitant, childlike. The left hand joined, slow and rich, anchoring the melody with the weight of loss. A father's absence, a mother's voice faded by time. Those who'd known hardship felt it instantly. The trembling start, the notes searching, then soaring briefly, only to collapse into minor keys like unanswered prayers. This wasn't a performance. It was remembrance. A sigh broke from the front row. An ambassador's wife dabbed her cheek. A young violinist in the balcony leaned so far forward his glasses fell, clattering below. No one shushed him. No one moved. Arya's tempo shifted, her fingers striking with sudden power, percussive bursts like fists against a locked door. Her body moved with the sound, shoulders tight, spine bowed. The rhythm became defiant, angry, alive. Cried out, *, I was never given a chance. You shut your doors, but I am still here. *. Each crescendo was a confession, each diminuendo a vacuum pulling the crowd closer. Even Victor, watching from the green room, froze mid-step, his hand on his own piano's keys. She had no sheet music, no orchestra, no conductor. Yet she commanded every soul like a maestro. Halfway through, Arya slowed. Her left hand dropped, and her right began a simple melody in E major, wistful, climbing like it was reaching for the stars. She repeated it, then changed it. A note bent downward, another skipped. The audience understood. This was her mother's lullaby, untrained but unmistakable. It shattered them. The notes faded, and Arya held the final chord so lightly it was almost a breath, then released it into silence. The applause erupted like a dam breaking, primal, not polite. Chairs scraped, some stood, others shouted. Tears fell in places that hadn't known weeping in decades. A voice from the balcony cried, "Encore!" Another yelled, "Arya! Arya!" She didn't rise or react. She turned her face upward, as if listening to the sound with her skin. Backstage, Victor poured a drink with shaking hands. "They won't remember me tonight," he muttered. "They'll remember her." He wasn't wrong. The gala's live stream shattered viewership records. News outlets scrambled. Social media exploded with clips, tributes, and commentary. Composers posted reaction videos. Critics wrote emergency editorials calling Arya's performance a once-in-a-century expression of the human spirit. By morning, her name was the top trending search in over 20 countries. And Arya? She had no idea. In her quiet hotel room, she sat cross-legged on the carpet, hands in her lap, while Alcott's tea grew cold. "Was it enough?" she asked softly. He leaned forward, voice reverent. "You didn't just play music, Arya. You changed its shape." She tilted her head. "But I didn't finish the story." He smiled. "No, because now the world will be asking for more." The next morning, a breathless man jogged toward her in the concert hall's side exit, the echo of applause still lingering. "Miss Bellamy, I'm Anthony Liu with Deutsche Harmonia Records. Your performance, I don't have words. We'd like to discuss signing you, a global tour, a studio album, anything you want. Name it." Arya twisted the silk tassel on her cane, the wind brushing through stained glass windows. Alcott stepped forward, protective. "She'll speak when she's ready." And she did, but not as expected. "Do you know what prelude means?" she asked softly. Anthony blinked. The beginning, right?" "It's an introduction," she said, turning toward the auditorium. Tonight wasn't the story. It was just the prelude. Offers poured in, labels, symphonies, cultural ministries, royal patrons. Arya answered none. She and Alcott took a train to Salzburg, to a quiet retreat with open windows where she could hear the wind. As the countryside rolled by, she pressed her palm to the glass and whispered, "They want me to play songs I haven't lived yet." Alcott smiled. "You've always played from your scars. Maybe now it's time to play from your healing." Back at Eastbrook, Victor Bell stayed behind, silent since the gala. He watched replays of Arya's performance on an old analog monitor, rewinding by feel. Each note stabbed deeper, reminding him of what he'd forgotten. How to bleed into the keys. He began composing again, not for audiences, but for himself, raw, intimate pieces that began with silence, just like hers. One day, he audited a beginner's improvisation class, surrounded by students generations younger. "I never learned to feel my way through music," he admitted, "only how to dominate it." But I've met someone who listens better than I ever did. The conservatory itself transformed. Donations poured in with demands. Accessible programs, blind editions, scholarships for non-traditional students. A new wing was built, glass-walled, acoustically alive, named the Bellamy Wing for sonic exploration. Its entrance bore Arya's words, "Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of everything waiting to be heard." Arya kept moving, leaving music like footprints. In a Pyrenees village, she taught a boy with autism to feel rhythm through vibrations in his feet. In Lebanon, she played lullabies through tent walls. In Seoul, she pinned sheet music to telephone poles with notes that read, "Play this and pass it on." She didn't tour. She traced the world with sound. Her influence rippled. In France, they called it Louis Libre free listening. In Kenya, Nyimbo Zie Moyo songs of the heart. In Canada, simply the Arya Way. Musicians began performing in nursing homes, stairwells, buses, abandoned churches. Not for applause, but for connection. A tiny circle, drawn in chalk or ink, marked their music. An ear, always listening. Years later, Arya sat in a weathered coastal cafe in Iceland, her hands resting on a piano older than the building. Keys stuck, some yellowed, but it sang. A dozen locals gathered, no cameras, no fanfare. They came because they'd heard a story. A girl who turned their sounds into music. A fisherman's daughter spoke of her father crying for the first time since her mother's death. A baker brought warm bread as reverence. Arya asked each person, "What sound is home?" Firewood crackling. Snow before it lands. She nodded and played, weaving their answers into a melody that felt like hearth and heartbeat. The world kept singing her name. Universities built listening courses. Therapists used her melodies to reach silent children. In courtrooms, her story became a case for inclusion. But Arya stayed present in the quiet places. A hospital in Buenos Aires, a rooftop in Mumbai, a monastery in Kyoto where she turned wind and water into symphonies of stillness. One day, in a Laos village garden, she handed her cane to a curious girl and said, "It's your turn now, to hear." The girl asked, "Hear what?" Arya placed a hand on her chest. "Start here." That night, Arya played her final piece. No audience, just the wind and crickets. It wasn't grand, just the sound of a life at peace. When the sun rose, she was gone. Not mourned, but remembered in every breath, every silence, every note that dared to be heard. In a dusty orphanage, a stranger with a silver bell on her wrist touched a forgotten piano and played a melody that drew children close. It was the last recorded sighting of Arya Bellamy. No obituary followed, only a silence like falling snow. But her music lived, in hospital waiting rooms, subway tunnels, classrooms where blind students felt rhythm through movement. In Harlem, a mural of an ear read, "Listen deeper." In Eastbrook's Bellamy Wing, a piano waited, surrounded by empty chairs, inviting anyone to play. Years later, a blind girl named Nora approached that piano, trembling. She played one note, and the sound came not from the keys but from within. Arya had given her permission to play, to hear, to exist. And in a distant canyon, if you sit long enough, you might hear an echo. Not a song, but a presence. That's where Arya is now. Not gone, just everywhere we choose to listen. So the next time you hear a child hum, an old man tap a rhythm, or your own breath fall into sync with the world, stop, be still. Remember the girl who was mocked, who played one note, and taught the world to hear. Arya Bellamy didn't seek fame. She didn't demand a stage. She just played to wake us up. And her melody, the still singing,